Okay, so what is a rhetorical analysis? Rhetorical analysis is essentially an essay that breaks down a work, most of the time nonfiction, and shows how it creates a certain effect. So technically, you break down your given work into parts that show how the author writes instead of what. And these techniques that the author uses to create this certain effect are called rhetorical strategies, which include but are not limited by hyperbole, repetition, antecedent parallel structure. And the soapstone strategy is what assists this process. Soapstone is a 6-part analytical strategy used for finding the purpose of the rhetorical choices that the author has chosen. The name itself is an acronym with the letters standing for speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, and tone. Speaker is who is narrating this work, or who wrote or who is speaking. Occasion is what is going on at the time and place that this document was written. Audience is who the document is directed at. Purpose is why the author wrote the article or document. Subject is the subject of the document or the primary topic of the work. And finally, tone is the tone that the author takes throughout the article, as shown by his diction, article, Speech on Slavery by Abraham Lincoln. So the speaker here is obviously Abraham Lincoln, seen right here. The occasion is pre-Civil War slavery and racial tensions, as seen by the title, and its date, which is about 7 years before the start of the Civil War. Audience is directed mainly at slave owners to convince them that slavery is wrong, seen by the quote here and the quote here, just defining how it's religiously wrong to own slaves. Its purpose is to guide the American people down the right path and to set people straight on the topic of slavery, seen here as Abraham Lincoln describes the power of hope upon humans and how slavery is devoid of this. Subject is slavery and why it is a terrible burden to force upon certain people, seen by the same quote. It derives hope and leaves no happiness within the person. And finally, its tone is somber, very somber, serious, but yet hopeful, as we see at the end, as Lincoln lays out a bright future for those who adapt a free system of labor.
Okay, so now it's time to talk about a very important part of writing a rhetorical analysis essay, identifying the author's claim. This claim will be the basis of what you'll be writing about, so you want to make sure you get it right. It wouldn't look good if you wrote about the author arguing for the protection of jungles when he was actually writing about sea exploration. And that's no bueno. Now, more often than not, the author's claim is either directly stated or incited within the first paragraph. So before you go into analyzing the entire essay, it would be smart to skim over the first paragraph to get an understanding of what the author is writing about. Once you have identified the claim, it's helpful to write it off to the side of the article like so. This will be a helpful reference as you do the next part of the rhetorical analysis. Now the next part. Once you have the claim, you want to read through the article and start searching for rhetorical devices. You also want to be able to explain why the author used certain rhetorical devices in certain situations. Now caution, never ever, and I cannot stress this enough, never use the unholy triangle, ethos, pathos, or logos as a device. Teacher will probably cry, and I can promise you they are not happy tears. So avoid the unholy triangle as much as possible. Actually, no, at whatever cost. When reading through your basic devices, such as metaphors, similes, or alliteration, are safe bets, but it will really put a smile on your teacher's face if you can get a bit more sophisticated. Try to find devices such as anaphora, juxtaposition, and antithesis. Not only are they good devices, but even if you don't know what they mean, they sound pretty smart. So remember, when doing a rhetorical analysis essay, make sure to quickly identify the claim and then search for rhetorical devices that the author uses to strengthen their argument. And remember, stay away from the unholy triangle on how to analyze an article. Now this one is called Speech on Slavery by Abraham Lincoln. It's important to note that this was before his presidency, where he was already very anti-slavery. So the first step is going to read the first paragraph to identify the claim. Now, let's read. Equality in society alike beats inequality, whether the latter be of the British aristocratic sort or of the domestic slavery sort. Now, this claim is pretty evident and easy to point out. It's obviously speaking out against slavery because of his attitude between the difference between the British aristocrat and the slavery class. Alrighty. Now, as we move on, we can now start looking for rhetorical devices the author uses to help aid his argument. Now, the first one was evident in pretty much the entire first paragraph, so we can highlight that. And this device is called a juxtaposition. Now, what that means is the fact of two things being seen or placed close together with contrasting effect. So now this is the author's first of many uses of a collective pronoun, us. So we're going to highlight that. And right off to the side, collective pronoun. This helps to add a sense of community, a sense that everyone is in this and it's not aimed at one particular group throughout the speech. Let's continue. There is no permanent class of hired laborers amongst us. There it is again. Us. 25 years ago, I was a hired laborer. The hired laborer of yesterday labors on his own account today and will hire others to labor for him tomorrow. Now this is one that we can use. Now I know at the beginning we said do not use ethos, but this is a different type of ethos. This is a personal connection which helps bond him with his audience so that they can trust in him better. So we're going to write that off to the side on our list. Alrighty, let's move on. Advancement or improvement in condition. Now we can stop this real quick. I'm not sure if it's going to be a reoccurring theme, but it is something to point out that he is putting the parameters on what advancement is to him. So we'll write on our list, setting parameters. Is the order of things in a society of equals. As labor is the common burden of our race, there's that collective pronoun again, so the effort of some to shift their share of the burden onto the shoulders of others is the great durable curse of the race. Originally, a curse for transgression upon the whole race, when, as by slavery, it is concentrated on a part only, it becomes the double refined curse of God upon his creature. In this, you can mention the use of religion, God upon his creature, curse, and that's about their curse for transgression as well. So we could add to the list religious language. Free labor has the inspiration of hope. Pure slavery has no hope. Here we see again what we saw at the very beginning, juxtaposition. The power of hope upon human exertion and happiness is wonderful. The slave master himself has a conception of it, and hence the system of tasks among slaves. The slave whom you cannot drive with the lash to break 70 pounds of hemp in a day, if you will task him to break 100 and promise him pay for all he does over, he'll break you 150. Right here, we have a huge, fairly long anecdote that helps describe the nature of slavery. Now, for those who don't know, an anecdote is a kind of a short story within a piece to help explain a lesson or a concept. Benjamin Franklin was famous for these in his writings. And now we'll finish off. You have substituted hope for the rod. And yet perhaps it does not occur to you that to the extent of your gain in the case, you have given up on the slave system and adopted the free labor system. Alrighty. Right here, I believe this is a paradox as well, so we can do this, they are putting side by side the slave system and free system of labor, which were originally thought to be very contrasted and different. But now Abraham Lincoln is making the point that how man has been going, it is not so different at all. So now we have an annotated article full with our different rhetorical devices and a list along with our claim. So we can now use this information to start putting it into an essay using quotes from which we've highlighted and explaining how the author uses these to further his claim that we need to speak out against slavery and that it's taking over our systems. Alrighty, thank you very much for listening. Now go get that 5.